Hey, what's going on, champs? I'm Aaron Deliosa. Welcome to an Immigrant's Life podcast, my podcast about immigrants and immigration and everything in between. Thank you for listening and downloading the show, and thank you for supporting my dad.
Welcome back, Immigrant Nation. Another week, another new episode. As always, every week, I will never get tired of expressing my gratitude to you all. Thank you for your support, and thank you for always being here and joining us to listen to these amazing stories of these amazing people. And as a healthy reminder, if you haven't joined the Immigrant Nation officially, I implore you to go ahead and click the subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast. And you can also join us by visiting our social media accounts. Our handle is at An Immigrant's Life. And also, if you or someone you know wants to be a guest on the podcast, reach out to our social media accounts, as I've mentioned just now, or email us at animmigrantslife@yahoo.com. Let's connect and let's tell your beautiful story. That's the biz. Now, let's talk about the episode. I had a great dialogue with this week's guest. We talk about books, his immigration journey, and how he got into being an advocate of immigrating and fighting for immigrants' rights. I know you will enjoy this conversation as much as I did. So let's get to the point, shall we? Without further ado, let's get into the show. Isa, dalawa, tatlo. Today's guest is the founder of Passage Immigration Law. He's an amazing blogger, lawyer, and a great family man. Everyone, please welcome Erick Widman.
Thank you so much, Aaron. I really appreciate being here.
It's an honor to have you. To be honest, I was really excited to talk to you because I haven't had anyone come on as a lawyer.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm really honored to have you on, and I'm glad that you reach out.
Yeah, definitely. And as someone who immigrated myself, we'll get into that, I'm sure. Plus being an immigration lawyer, I feel like there's kind of a unique double perspective we can explore.
Excellent. Before we continue talking about the cool things, why don't you tell the Immigrant Nation where they can reach you, or if you want to promote anything?
Well, great. Yeah, they can find us at passage.law. That's our law firm. And I'm online with my name, Erick Widman, various social channels.
Yeah, I check out your website. I love your website. It's so entertaining and also it's very educational.
Well, great. Yeah, that's good. I've started it when I lived in Hungary at the one with my name, and I've struggled a bit knowing what to put on there. Sometimes it's just some personal anecdotes. Sometimes it's about business. So I've got to get a coherent strategy there.
I love how it is already. Like, I love what you said, that it's just you thought of, I don't know, today I'm gonna do laundry, and you'll talk about laundry for a few lines, and I love the simplicity of it.
Right. Well, thank you. Yeah, it was kind of a journal too when we lived outside of North America.
Exactly. Just to give a background for the guests, where were you originally from?
I grew up in California, in Cupertino, Apple headquarters. And so unique upbringing, lots of animals, not exactly a farm, but a lot of horses and goats and things. And then I went to college and law school in California, and then moved to Hungary after law school, where I met my wife, and we lived over there for a few years. And now we live in Portland, Oregon.
Beautiful. Yeah, I did some reading about you, and you said that you had a pretty ideal childhood. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, in retrospect, I realized how good I had it, because I had a stable family. We had some land that I got to run around on, 3 U.S. acres. We had those animals, and I was in nature a lot, and that's so crucial for mental health. And kids of my own these days who are drawn to screens, there's so much looking at phones and screens, and it's just crucial to be outside. So that made me, I think, have a healthy perspective about life, just being outside a lot.
What did your parents do for a living then?
My dad was a math major, and I was never that great at math, but he became a software engineer. And my mom was a teacher, and
Oh,
she was
okay.
kind of a California hippie who wanted to promote. She wanted to promote world peace during the Cold War and was
Hmm.
studying Russian and
Oh,
trying.
definitely
Yeah,
hippie.
but yeah, good parents.
Hmm. What type of kid were you? Were you a troublemaker?
Yeah, yes. It could have been worse, but I was a good student, but definitely I could see how I could have gotten in a lot of trouble if I got caught for some of the things that I did in junior high. And yeah, and I as I learn about as a lawyer how law enforcement targets people unfairly,
Hmm.
I recognize I probably got off as a white guy
Mhm.
easier than others.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Do you have that white guilt?
Well, in the high school, I went to a very diverse high school for Silicon Valley standards, and it's majority Asian.
Hmm.
And my friends called me an egg because I was white on the outside but yellow on the inside. And
That's horrible.
so there's a joke for you.
That's funny. Speaking of Asian, I saw that you went to Japan when you were 14
Yes,
years old. How did that work? What made you travel and go to
yes.
Japan?
That was such a formative experience for me. I applied to be an exchange student. It was just a summer, maybe 2 months, but I was young. It was the first, it might have been the first airplane I'd been on, and it was an international flight all the way over to Japan,
Hmm.
and it was an amazing experience. The
Mhm.
Japanese were so hospitable. I stayed with the host family and learned their customs. We're sleeping on tatami mats and on the floor and taking these ceremonial baths, and the people were so kind and thoughtful
Hmm.
that opened my eyes to wanting to study international affairs. And that's what I studied in college as a result. And then I wanted to live abroad. And so I think everybody in the world should live in another country at some point.
Who pushed you to do the exchange student program? Was it mom, dad, or just you?
I think it was mom who told us about it. And then I thought it was pretty cool. And so I heard about it, and you had to try out, and so not everybody was selected for it because we were representing Cupertino.
Mm.
And now I have two boys who are junior hires because I had such a great experience. They're going to Japan next week as junior hires,
Nice. Oh,
or
that,
next month rather, a couple weeks from now.
that's
And
amazing.
they're doing a similar thing.
That's beautiful. Are you scared?
We considered being chaperones, but we didn't want to. My wife and I thought, because some parents are going as chaperones,
Mm.
but they're going to learn and grow so much more. And that's what I did. They're
Yeah.
yeah. There's access to like cigarettes and things like that. This they could find the beer if they really want to. But they're
Mm.
junior hires. I mean, so I don't. It's well chaperoned, so I'm not so concerned.
Yeah, I have kids myself, but my eldest is in high school and my youngest is in elementary. But this is how I talk to them about finding beer, smoking cigarette, and whatnot. Like I tell them that I've shown you what's right and wrong.
Right.
Now that is my right and wrong. That doesn't mean that's your right and wrong. I'm teaching you this because I want you someday when you are on your own, maybe hanging out with friends or whatever, you can practice that thing that I taught you to decide what is right and wrong. So I'm pretty sure you're a great dad. I'm sure they're gonna be okay.
Exactly. And kids need to develop their own set of standards, and if you shield them from everything, they're not going to develop that muscle of decision making
Hmm.
and values and figure things out. So we'll guide them, but I think it's in some ways best for kids to experiment a little bit if it doesn't really hurt them.
Yeah, I mean they're allowed to make mistakes. We make mistakes every day,
Right.
and that's
Right.
the best way to learn.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to explore. I think books have been written recently about how all this helicopter parenting, where parents are following their kids everywhere and not giving them a chance to do some dangerous things. So I think within reason, we got to go back to that.
Yeah, of course. I think it's just the idea of, oh, there's a bad guy right around the corner about to grab your baby.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that maybe it's like a shark attack that they get publicized a lot, but in fact, there's like 2 people or some small statistic in the entire world die from shark attacks each year, but we kill 200 million sharks. I remember reading about that.
Yeah, yeah. I see what you're saying. Like, I mean, of course, if it ever happens, it's such a horrible thing to ever happen.
Right.
That's why I think we're focusing on the negative, even though it's like, let's say 2% chance of it's happening.
Exactly.
How long did you stay in Japan?
I believe it was 6 weeks or maybe 2 months.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a long time ago, about 25 years ago. But it really changed everything for me, and then brought about a love for international travel, a love to explore, and my wife is Hungarian, and we have dual citizen kids. So they're not half Japanese, but that whole experience opened my eyes to the world.
So after law school, you decided to go to Hungary. Why Hungary? Why specific? Why Hungary?
Yes. So I heard about this amazing program, and I think I was trying to defer the real world a bit because I had some debt from law school, and I didn't want to just join a big firm and be a corporate lackey there. But I heard about this amazing program where you could teach in a college. And because I had this new law degree, I could teach in Russia, Hungary, or China were the main opportunities to teach business law. And so I opted for Hungary and was glad I did. I knew a bit about it, but I'd never been there before. We'd done a house exchange with a French family growing up. So I'd been to France, and that's a great program too. I'd encourage people to do that. Amazing. We stayed in their house, they stayed in ours, and wonderful cultural exchange. But I love going to Hungary, and I was there for a year teaching.
Obviously, you were teaching English.
And so I was able to teach in English, thankfully, and I taught business law, U.S. history, and international trade.
U.S. history?
Yeah, that was one of my classes they gave me, and they figured as a lawyer I must know enough about it, and I enjoyed that a lot. But business law was the main thing that I taught, and then on the side I might have even had a conversational English class. So they put me to work to use my good English. And a lot of the students liked Native American or Native English speakers for the accent. And that's why they wanted to hire us, even though we're so young.
Get the American over here.
Yes.
But
so yeah.
Did you go to a organization that sets up this program, or you just decided to go?
Yes. Yeah. So it was with a program. It's a nonprofit. They might have gone out of business, unfortunately. It's called Educational Services International, ESI. Great program that placed teachers all over the world. So we were able to go into an existing program that had the human resources, the paperwork side of this all figured out, so that we could get paid by the Hungarian government. So there's some kind of existing program set up. I think it might be similar to the JET program for Japan, or some other programs that I'm not familiar with, but I know exist, where you could teach overseas, and they streamline the process for you.
So how was that experience, you being an American living in Hungary? What do they speak there, by the way?
And they do speak Hungarian.
Okay. So how was your experience?
Yeah, so I started learning Hungarian, but it's so easy for English speakers these days, especially in Europe, to get around, because people preferred to speak in English with me to practice. But out of respect, of course, anyone, an English speaker, Americans are bad at this in general, we should learn as much as possible, and simply trying to speak and learn, shows a lot of respect for the culture, of course. But they speak Hungarian. It's pretty tough language, part of the Finno-Ugric language group. It's related to Finnish. So yeah, it's not, doesn't have a Latin base. It's not Slavic. So, but I was able to teach in English, and in Budapest, a lot of people, and that's the capital where I was at, it was very cosmopolitan and easy to get around with. There's just a lot of English all over the place. So it was a wonderful experience because I was able to soak up Hungarian history and culture. And I was reading a book about Hungarian culture when my wife, my future wife to be, I ran into her on the campus. She was not my student, but we started talking. I held the door open for her on the campus at the Budapest College of Foreign Trade. And she said, "Thank you," in English. So I asked her, "How did you know to speak to me in English?" And she said, "Well, we know who the native English speaker teachers are." And then I was reading that Hungarian history book, so I was able to sound very impressive to her that I knew all about Hungarian history. And so that scored some points.
Was she a student?
Yes. So she was a student there at the Budapest College of Foreign Trade and getting essentially her master's degree. So I was only 26 at that point. I think she was 22 or 23. But yeah, these programs have to watch out. They send over 20-something-year-old teachers who are single. You're going to meet people. Was
it love at first sight?
It was, and I have a journal. I was keeping a journal, paper journal. It's one of my most prized possessions. And so I've written down my first impressions of my wife. We've been married 21 years now.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. And so she's very impressive, obviously, I'm biased, but yeah, I was quite smitten from the beginning. And she had been an exchange student herself in the US for a year. So she kind of knew what she would be getting into if she was dating an American guy and eventually living in the US.
How long did you guys date before you guys decided to, you know what, you're my person?
Yes. So a little over 2 years. And so, yeah, we met in the fall of 1999 and got married in fall of 2001. So I was living in Hungary for a lot of that time. And then we had a bit of a long distance relationship. That helps me relate to my clients who are also separated from their loved ones internationally, whether it's a fiance or a spouse. And it's pretty tough. The Zoom and Google Meet helps connect people more, but being in person is what it's all about.
You need that physical touch.
Right.
Yeah. I understand that though, because I grew up without my mom. When I was 8, she left to work in Hong Kong, and she will work for 2 years and then come home for a month and then just continues, but go back to Hong Kong for 2 years. And that lasted till I was 20.
Wow. And she was doing that, sacrificing for you, no doubt.
No doubt. Like we knew it. Of course, it was extremely difficult. Christmas, New Year, birthday, mom's not there.
Yeah, and so many families who are outside of North America are willing to do that because they see the opportunity and want to provide a better life for their kids. And yeah, sometimes people who grew up in a richer setting just don't understand that level of sacrifice.
Definitely. Going back to your wife, when you went back to the US, did you propose by then, or you were thinking of it?
Yeah. Oh, you're such a good question asker. So I proposed to her on one of her visits after I'd moved to the US. And then, yeah, we were figuring things out because we didn't know if an international relationship would be the best. We were thinking, is this going to add in additional complexity? Couldn't you find a Hungarian guy? Of course you could. I'd find an American, but we found our soulmates. We were inseparable, and it was the right choice. And that's why I think people need to travel, because your special someone is very likely in a different country. It's just a bigger pool of people.
Speaking of doubting your relationship, when the doubt was settling in, how did you get rid of the doubt?
Well, everybody's different. I recognize that. So I'm fairly analytical, also intuitive, but I remember just analyzing things too much, thinking about, and part of it's bad law school training, where we're trained to think of worst case scenarios. where I was thinking, oh, she would regret living in the U.S., being kind of stuck here. I was open to moving back there and living in Europe, but I think the doubts just came in. Would it be worth it to take on all this extra complexity? And her family would miss her so much. And we have this long international flight. So a lot of the doubts just came from, is it worth it? And that's what the dating process was, where we confirmed it absolutely is. And we realized we couldn't live without each other. We didn't want to.
So what stopped you from moving to Hungary instead of her moving to US?
What we initially, my debt from law school, a top priority was to pay that off. It's just so expensive with the US system with education. If you don't, most of the time you have to take some kind of loan out, and I certainly did. So we wanted to get rid of that, and salaries are higher in general. So I got a job at Philips Electronics in their legal department, and we saved a lot. We were able to pay that off. And then we moved back to Hungary in 2007. So, and then that's when I got the equivalent of the US green card. I became a permanent resident of Hungary for about 2 years. And so I was so glad to do that. And then we were hoping to have kids. The big question at that point was, where are we going to raise our kids? And it was easier for me. And yeah, this happens a lot. Part of it's the man's job. Perhaps the woman or the partner gets stuck with following the guy. But my English and her English in the US is way better than my Hungarian. And the opportunities in the US were greater. So we ultimately opted to be here.
And I know the process of bringing her to the US is almost insurmountable. How did that affect your relationship, and how did it affect you personally?
Well, I was figuring out what type of law I wanted to practice long term. So I handled her immigration paperwork. I had some immigration law experience from law school and my corporate job. So I handled her paperwork, and we did the green card application, the adjustment of status. We looked into a fiance visa. And I realized, wow, this is complex for a lawyer. This is a pain point we can help other immigrants with. And I also just love looking at passports. I love looking at international documents. Kind of gets me excited to the stamps and passports. All of those are like this, an adventure. Every time you get on a flight, it's a big, big adventure. So yeah, that helped steer me towards immigration law.
I said it earlier. Let's change the topic a little bit, because I really want to talk about your blog. I love your blog, and one of the pieces that you wrote was that entitled was "Shall we give spare change to homeless?" And I love that topic because I too struggle with that. Like, should I give this guy money, or should I tell him to go get a job?
That's right. I might have written that from Hungary. I forget where I was when I wrote that, but it's become an even bigger issue here in Portland, Oregon, where homelessness is so widespread. And I talk about this with our kids too, where compassion is needed, but some tough love is needed too. And it is really difficult to find that balance.
Yeah. So
it's challenging.
The question is, do you give?
So I have given change to the homeless in the past. I prefer to give them food or water. For the most part, though, these days, it's not good. But I'm just walking right on by without giving anything. And there's so many homeless people. And in front of our office, we often have tents And it's a bit frustrating that my kids are in Boy Scouts, and sometimes my dark humor is that, hey, let's all do camping in the woods, not here in the streets.
That's funny. I
Yeah.
know it's hard. Like, okay, I'll share a story to you. I was new here in Montreal. I mean, fresh off the boat, right? And I found a job. I was working in this fast food company. It's not great, but it's a job. And coming from the Philippines, I was raised poor. It was amazing. And I went downtown Montreal and I saw this homeless person got a ticket from a policeman. And the homeless guy said, how, calling him names and whatever. And he says, how can I pay this? I don't have a job. And the police says, well, get a job. And the guy says, I don't speak French. I don't know if you know, but in Quebec, we speak French and English, but
Right.
mostly French.
Right.
And in my head, I said, I barely speak English. I barely speak French. I have a job. Go get a job.
Right.
So I'm always in the middle of like coming from this country, no job, no nothing. And then I see these people, obviously, some of them has mental issues and whatever else, but I know it's hard for me.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a common scenario where immigrants to the US in particular are often the strongest in favor of tough border restrictions or cutting benefits because they've personally known how hard they've worked. And then when they think, or they say, I came in the so-called legal way, why should someone who came across the border unlawfully get kind of free pass or amnesty? So that sentiment's understandable, and it's a tough topic.
Yeah, it is a tough topic. And I like what you said there that most immigrants that came legally usually become very tough on people that ask for asylum or like again here in Quebec we're at the border of US. There's no border, by the way. There's no it's just
Right.
a land. But
Right.
on the other side there are the RCMPs, which are the police, Canadian police. Once you cross, they'll say, "Hey, by the way, you're in Canada. We will arrest you." And then the people that try to cross it will say, "Oh, I'm looking for asylum." So a lot of people from the immigrants like me came legally. Some of them gets mad and say, "Hey, we paid this amount of money and hardship. He just gonna cross just like that?"
Yeah, yeah, and something that everyone should keep in mind though, and as an immigration lawyer, international law protects people seeking asylum, and that is lawful. It's legal to seek asylum and flee persecution. That's really important, and we need to protect that. And I think Americans, as we could experience some kind of disaster like that, like a biological or chemical weapon going off, and we have to flee across the border and seek some kind of relief. That's a possibility. So we should keep that in mind too. We're very confident and cocky sometimes about we have everything we need, but we also need to think about our neighbors too.
In Europe, there's free border, right? Like you can pretty much go to different countries without visa. Do you think that's a possibility that could happen here in at least Canada, US, and Mexico?
Yeah, like excuse me, the Schengen area in Europe, they have that, and these treaties are available, and we have the NAFTA treaty, which can be controversial for more conservative folks on that side of the spectrum, where they don't like the TN visa. That's a possibility for Canadians and Mexicans to come into the US. But many people point out we should expand that type of free trade environment. And NAFTA was certainly, that was the goal, to make free trade and the free movement of people and goods more possible. But then Mr. Trump and others have wanted to either get rid of it or lock it down in pursuit of nationalism.
Speaking of Trump, how did he affected your business, your law firm?
he scared a lot of people, and he was pretty effective with implementing anti-immigrant policies. And it was sad because a lot of his platform, a lot of the reasons he got elected was on demonizing immigrants for things that they shouldn't be held responsible for. And it was really disgusting many times. At the same time, as my wife pointed out from Hungary, that the Trump supporters, they often have some legitimate concerns that we need to understand, that we need to understand why they're so fearful and the economic uncertainty that exists in their life. But my immigrant clients were definitely impacted by the travel ban that he implemented. And that was terrible, to discriminate against nationality, race, religion. There's that Muslim ban. And I was proud as an attorney that I think it was Washington State, they stood up against the most powerful man in the world and argued in court that this ban is unconstitutional, and they won. So the Constitution and the rule of law ultimately prevailed.
Beautiful. Why do you think anti-immigration sentiment is so rampant in the US, or in the media at least?
I think the best explanation for it is that people who don't know why the world is changing so rapidly technologically, why their jobs are going away, that for decades their manufacturing jobs were pretty stable. And so with all this radical change, if someone says immigrants are taking your jobs, they're responsible for this, then that a lot of people can believe that. And it's demonizing, it's scapegoating, and it's really unfair, because the reality is only immigration is going to save our economy and be it's going to be the bright future for us that we need.
Yeah, it's an issue here too in Quebec, because our premier, he's like the governor of Quebec, and they're anti-immigration. And he's telling that if you don't speak French, you're not coming to Quebec, and it's affecting us right now. There's so much companies that are looking for workers they can't find workers because people have moved on, or young people doesn't want to do the small jobs. But like I said, what you said, immigrants are the keys. They will come and take the job because no one wants to do it anyway.
Oh, absolutely. There's so many restaurants. There are so many businesses here in Oregon and also along the West Coast of the US that are struggling to find workers. And the solution is immigration, because the native-born folks are not stepping up to take these jobs. And there are a lot of tough jobs out there that people are not willing to take. And so we need them to be filled as soon as possible.
Yeah, you mean the jobs that apparently being stolen from them that they didn't want to do?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like both ways. For example, killing cows. That job, I understand, is filled exclusively by some tough immigrants. What a horrible job, shooting a bolt through a cow's head. And all the agricultural workers, the backbreaking labor. And actually, my wife she picked strawberries for a summer where Hungarians would go to Scotland. And they, I think it was under the table, it was unauthorized. She went to a farm, lived in a tent. She was a seasonal worker in Scotland picking strawberries.
Yeah, like we need immigration. We need people to fill this job, or else the economy is going to crumble.
That's right. It's clear cut, and most business leaders understand that. And I think the reason we have gridlock is many Republicans, many conservatives are okay with the status quo because they like illegal immigration in many ways, because it creates compliant workers. It creates basically workers you can push around and not pay very much. So not everybody is people are not saying you're evil if you're conservative by any means. I'm not implying that. But there's been a lack of solutions that for immigration reform that we need to fix.
What do you think would fix it?
There needs to be a realistic, honest assessment of what our country needs, and then recognize immigration is the way forward for that. We need an easier way for someone with a PhD to stay in the US and get a visa, get a green card. We need a way for entrepreneurs to start businesses and stay here without all these hoops to jump through. And so many people are leaving and going to Canada instead. You guys are much better and smarter about immigration than the US. And with the businesses struggling to find workers, the solution is very urgent over here.
Yeah, us too. We're struggling here. In different provinces, they're pretty much, I think they're okay, but Quebec, we're struggling because we're not getting immigrants. Because yes, they'll get immigrants from countries that speak French, but it's not enough.
The need is massive. Elon Musk has even said that population decline is a huge issue that could crash the global economy. And I think Japan is really experiencing that. Europe is experiencing that to an even greater degree than North America.
Yeah, I heard that because like me, I have some young friends and they don't want to have kids.
Right.
And I tell them, like, hey, if you don't want kids, don't have kids because it's extremely challenging.
Yes.
You have 3 kids or do you have 2 kids?
Three. And 2 boys and a girl, ages 13, 11, and 9.
Beautiful. I saw that you read Cormac McCarthy's The Road.
Yes.
Oh, man. I read the book too, and I read the book like just before I had my first son. It was bad. It was bad.
Oh, I read it after I think I had 1 or 2 kids. It's still one of my favorite books ever. And it is so impactful. And it's amazingly moving. And it's hopeful, despite being a really bleak, dark book. The triumph of the will to survive and love and hope prevailed in the end. It's a really beautiful book.
I said to myself, I'm never going to read that book again. I love the book. I completely agree with you, but I will never read that book again. I won't even tell anyone to read the book because, my God.
Oh, yeah. The ending is like a sledgehammer and in kind of a hopeful way, but intense.
Yeah. You also read East of Eden. I'm a Steinbeck fan.
Oh, yeah. We have so much in common. That was also an incredible book, one of my favorites.
Yeah.
And that about the beauty of human freedom and choice to choose your own destiny. And yeah, I love that.
Yeah, I'm a big Steinbeck fan. Every time I say that, I write, but I'm not Steinbeck because he's my dude. Going back to your wife, do you find it's a struggle to be married with a person that is not same culture as you?
I think, and I've only been married once, and I hope that'll remain the same. So I can't do much comparing and contrasting. But of course, I think there are extra complexities that can be a detriment or an asset. Depends how you leverage that. And there's the geographical complexity, but that could exist in big countries like Canada or the US. I think earlier on, and we had to do some working through cultural differences. And I encourage my clients to do the same thing, to figure out, do we just have a misunderstanding here based upon what a cultural expectation is? So I think international couples should do that work. I'm trying to think of an example where a Hungarian, simply smiling. This is an example. Americans, and I think Canadians probably more to the same degree, you're from the Philippines, but the Americans smile a lot more. So for a little while, I was thinking, Oz, are you upset about something when my wife wouldn't smile? And if you go to the airport in Europe in particular, I think Asia is similar. The Americans kind of have this smile on their face. They're more expressive. Even it can look kind of dumb if you're not talking to anybody. But it's overall, I mean, it's just our culture. We're friendly folks for the most part. But Eastern Europeans, Central Europeans have a more stoic look about them. And so I had to figure that out with my wife. Are you fine? And she was happy.
Is she still the same like that?
She, like so many immigrants, is caught between cultures. And since she's lived over here for 20 plus years, and she did naturalize, she's a dual citizen, but she's Hungarian fundamentally, but says the American things, has the American style expressions, and that's natural depending where you live. But on controversial topics, she sees the U.S. side and the European side.
I usually say it to myself is, my heart belongs in Canada, but my soul belongs in the Philippines.
Oh, I love that. That's beautiful.
It's just because I love both places. It's a different kind of love.
Yeah.
And
and it's possible to truly love and be supportive of two places. And that's the beauty of immigration, where you can genuinely be sold out. And if you naturalize, you become a citizen of the new country, you could be fully committed to that new country. But of course, you're going to love and care for your home country. You should. That's natural. And we should encourage that.
Yeah, especially if you grew up there,
Yes, absolutely.
Your last name, where is that from? Widman.
Yeah. So my grandfather, Widman, he was from Sweden, Sven Widman. So he was born in Sweden, immigrated here when he was pretty young. So that wave of Northern European immigration. But I think the name is actually German. And some Germans moved up to Sweden and then came to the U.S.
It's funny because I had one of my earliest guests. She went to Sweden as an exchange student for, I believe, 6 months. And she said that she never met anyone named Sven.
Oh, funny.
Yeah.
Maybe it's an out of date, unpopular name like Agnes. It used to be for like a grandparent name.
Yeah, like Betty.
Yes.
You know what I mean? What made you decide to start Passage Immigration Law?
I started as a corporate lawyer at Philips Electronics, and I liked working for this big Dutch company. I could have seen myself staying there for a long time. But then after 6 years, when we wanted to move back to Europe, and it's become increasingly easy to start your own company online. So we decided to do that, feeling adventurous. We went for it. And then so I just started helping people with their immigration matters, just like I helped my wife. And then that's grown since then. I decided I do like being an employer. I had to develop those skills, learn how to be a good boss, constantly learning, and having attorneys work for you and legal assistants. So now the goal is to help people what I call live globally. That's where you can realize your full potential in the best country for you. And for many people, that's moving to the US. Longer term, we want to help people live anywhere in the world, just like I lived in Hungary, to help them achieve their full potential.
Did you always wanted to be a lawyer?
I think it was in junior high or high school, and I heard a lawyer speak about his job, and I was always drawn to social science more than science or math, like my dad. So I loved reading the news and global affairs, and I studied international law. So I've always been curious about the world, and I wanted to figure out how things work on a global scale. And that's what led me down this path.
Yeah. There was a a former guest of mine who was a lawyer too. He was working for immigration, but apparently he said that it was emotionally taxing to practice. What kept you sane?
Yes. The challenge of client work, both for law, but I think anyone working with clients, is they're like a social worker. It's emotionally draining because they have so many challenges and problems. And one case has a number of challenges you're dealing with, but when you get into 50 or 100 folks who want you to take their burdens on, it is crucial to have a team. That's why I'm glad I don't do this on my own as a solo lawyer. I think that would be especially hard, where you can talk things through and figure out what's the best way I can help this person. How can I serve this client? But I can't control everything. Sometimes when a couple has relational problems, I almost want to coach them on that as opposed to just their legal issues, but that's not my role.
I mean, you can start another business on the side, you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and I've been learning about that. I studied to be a high performance coach to help my team, and I got certified in that last year. So that's something I want to do long term. And
What is that?
Yeah, so it is performance coaching, business coaching, but also personal development. And so I use it with my kids, I use it with myself, I use it with my team, where you figure out where you want to grow, what your goals are, and then develop certain areas like clarity in your life, like courage, and figuring what are the specific steps to get me to where I want to be.
Well, easy for you to say, get courage, but what ways can you apply and get courage?
Yeah, so it's all about being intentional, living an intentional life, deciding what's important to you, and then, because people often don't think it through, and then write down concrete steps. The power of writing in talking about it it's hugely impactful. It's empowering. And I did coaching myself several years ago, and that made me want to do the same thing for others because I benefited from it so much, where we think through, okay, what would a courageous person do in this instance? And so you just start, there's a bit of vision, you can meditate about it, but thinking through that and then tracking progress too. Was I more courageous today? Did I get outside my comfort zone? All of those steps are personal development for yourself and also for your team.
You enjoy coaching?
Yes, and I'm only doing it informally right now since I just got certified. I might branch out. I'm so busy as a lawyer, but I really enjoy it. I wanted to incorporate it and just kind of do it in a way that's natural or latent with my employees and my 3 kids. So I enjoy it a lot, but it's not really formal right now.
Are you a better lawyer or a better employer?
I am trying to be good at both. and I've realized though that in order for me to be a good employer, my attorneys need to have a lot of respect for me, that I know my stuff. It's kind of like a doctor who you've got to keep practicing medicine to lead other doctors. You've got to stay on top of the latest developments and be an exemplar to them and be an exemplary person and leader.
I love coaching too. I used to coach basketball, 13, 14-year-old boys, and it changed me so much. Because when I started coaching, my mentality was it's all about winning. You win or you lose, and it's all about winning. And then I make stock of myself and start reading and start doing research, and it completely changed me.
It is incredibly powerful, and it's not just a new fad. Of course, I went to UCLA and coached John Wooden, the basketball coach there, very famous, the most successful college coach of all time. One of his books is called the Success Pyramid of Success, and that was really helpful to establish habits amongst yourself and the people you're coaching. What do you draw upon when things are tough? And he talks about enthusiasm and perseverance and hard work. And we all can each grow in those ways. But coaching brings out the best in us.
Yeah, speaking of Wooden, one of my favorite story of his was before they start practicing, he will he will tell his players to tie their shoes for an hour.
Interesting. I have not heard that. Like in order to just tie it in the best possible way.
They will tie it and then they will untie it and then tie it again non-stop for an hour. Because he said, if you cannot fall in love with one thing and you cannot focus on those small thing, the details, you'll never succeed.
It sounds like the Karate Kid. If you've seen that with Mr. Miyagi,
of course.
Stuff. All right, yeah. So yeah, that type of discipline that could make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, I would not apply that way if I'm coaching, especially the kids now.
Yeah, we get in trouble, but it worked for Coach Wooden, that's for sure.
Yeah. What's the difference between immigration lawyer and an immigration consultant?
In the U.S., you have to be an immigration lawyer, a licensed attorney, in order to practice immigration law. There's a couple exceptions to that, but in many parts of the world, you don't need to be a licensed attorney to help people with immigration matters. So in Canada and Australia, a bunch of other places, you can just be trained without having a law license to give immigration advice. So that often works out quite well. It's a different approach in the U.S.
Do you do pro bono?
Yes, definitely. We have a couple pro bono cases right now. There's a huge, endless need. At my church, we do a clinic once a month. We're helping refugees and asylees. There's in Portland, Oregon, Refugee Adjustment Day, where every year a lot of lawyers come together and do the paperwork for free to get refugees a green card. So there's one-time events, and then we're working on some tough cases right now that it's really meaningful work when someone cannot pay, and we can't do a lot of these, but we do some pro bono cases that are really meaningful, sometimes disabled kids or folks separated from their parents.
Have you ever experienced a client find out that you have a pro bono and goes to you, hey, why don't you my case pro bono,
It's a good question. We have a couple spots for pro bono cases, and we don't have grant money like a nonprofit does. We would love to help more people. The reality is, to get great immigration results, we have to hire good people, good staff who are paid well, who are super smart. And there's different approaches to practicing law, but we insist upon having the best possible staff so they get the best possible results.
Of course. Speaking of that, you can save them all, obviously. But how do you find peace in that idea?
And peace in being a for-profit immigration service. So I think it is a great offering. I feel very content and happy about offering this type of law. Some people can't afford it, but those who want resolution to their problem, it's typically a great investment. For example, to get a green card, and we often charge, for example, a lot of money because it's a lot of work, $5,000 US to get someone a green card. We work with you a year. The sooner we can get someone a work permit, the sooner their life gets better and that investment gets paid off. So that in a month or two, pretty much anybody could pay back that investment. So we feel good. We're enabling people to earn more, to reach their full potential. And so I am very proud to be a immigration lawyer and an attorney these days, especially when immigrants' rights are under assault.
Hmm. I heard that if, let's say I'm Canadian, I move to the US, I heard it's so hard to get a green card as a Canadian in the US. Is that true?
It shouldn't be any more difficult for Canadians than others. I would say overall, it's a bit easier compared if you're coming from the Middle East or African. But as a wealthier nation, sometimes Canadians are given the benefit of the doubt about certain things. It's the system in the US is definitely broken. It's getting more and more difficult for everybody to get through it. It's frustrating, and so many cases are delayed that we're suing the government on a regular basis now because that's one of the few things that actually works.
Hmm. You said you work with asylum seekers. What do you learn about yourself working with them?
It's one of the most moving things to work with those fleeing persecution, and it's in an incredible experience to document what they went through and feeling horrible for this person, but also feeling inspired that they persevered despite the terrible things they fled from or experienced, or how badly they were treated by others. And when asylum works well in the US, when they are granted asylum when they deserve it, it's a beautiful thing because the power of the US government is protecting that person. And in some countries, this is only the power of the US will keep bad guys from hurting our clients. And that's why it's crucial for us. It's a good thing for us to open that door to hurting people around the world.
Well said. How can they prove that they're in trouble or they're in danger from their country?
It is very difficult because when you're fleeing from someone, maybe a government official who is trying to harm you or kill you and your kids, it's very difficult to get out of the country and carry a bunch of documents with you. And often the persecutor is not going to document that fact. So and when you come to the US, who's there to testify in your behalf? What type of proof is there? So it's challenging, and not every case is deserving of asylum, but the ones that have been persecuted, we need to protect those individuals. We need to put the time and resources into figuring out who deserves the protection, who doesn't. And right now, unfortunately, the Biden administration is starting to roll back protection for asylees and asylum seekers.
Really? Why?
They are concerned that when some of the Trump era policies will finish up, there's under COVID, there was a way to keep immigrants from coming into the US at a greater level. Biden administration wants asylum seekers to only come to a couple dedicated ports of entry rather than seeking refuge across the border at any spot. So they're trying to make it more specific. But the problem is that is going to harm many legitimate asylum seekers, because what if they can't go to that one designated spot? And that's a violation of their international rights.
Do you work with DACA recipients?
Yes. They're some of our favorite people, and they deserve a solution. It's stressful to live with the thought that I could be deported, and through no fault of theirs.
And it's not they're gonna get deported to a country that they don't even know nothing about.
That's right. Many don't speak Spanish even. Some do, and many are coming from Spanish-speaking countries, not all. But it's unfair to those young kids to not have a chance to get standardized and get work authorization. It's crazy that their work authorization could get taken away again if we don't have a long-term solution.
How do you find balance between your career and family time?
That is a difficult challenge. Thankfully, when my kids were really young, they're 9, 11, and 13, I made a point of spending a lot of time with them. And I think that was good for their brain development. They need me now too, of course. And so I try to be there for all their sporting events. And I'm often working later at night because I want to be with them from 5 to 7 or 8 p.m., but then I got to do some work after that. So yeah, the being there in person, I think, is crucial.
How about the wife?
She works full time as well. So we are glad that we're mostly working at home for both of us, since we're knowledge workers on the computer. So that's good that we cut out the commute and can see each other despite both working a lot of hours.
You like working from home?
I do. I got my dual monitor here and no commute, but I get into the office about once a week to meet with clients and to meet with the team.
When you have a rough day at the office, something, someone got denied or whatever, how do you stop yourself from bringing that work to home?
Right. Yeah, I'm glad the coaching and the personal development has been crucial for having the right perspective and the right tools to separate work stress. And I've had the journaling habit for a long time. That has been increasingly important for me to get the concerns out of my head and write it on paper. It's really quite effective for me. And I just had to do it the other night at 3 a.m. where my subconscious was thinking about this stuff. I woke up, I wrote it out, had kind of a meditation prayer, and it allowed me to go back to sleep.
How long have you been journaling?
Since college.
Wow.
And yeah. And sometimes more than others. But my favorite professor there was a medical ethics professor. And he was a doctor and said, you've got to start journaling. And it was such great advice. And he recommended, and I do it with a pen rather than, I tried on my computer a little bit, but I use a remarkable tablet now that is nice backup in case something bad happens to it. And so, yeah, I think writing it out by hand though is key.
Yeah, me too. I just started journaling. I did it back in college, but I always stop because I feel like I have the tendency to write a story instead of just writing one line or two.
Right. And that's great. Whatever is on your mind is worthwhile to write about. I'm so convinced that everybody should do this. I'm trying to get my kids to write things down, but they're resistant.
Good luck. You know that saying that if you want your kids to be readers, make sure you read every day or show books in the house? Not true.
Yes, that they should be absorbing things, but yeah, they don't. I was that way with my dad. He was a basketball player and I wasn't a basketball player. He liked math. I didn't like math. So I think it is natural for them to go the opposite way.
Yeah, until they realize that, oh, I am dad.
I guess that happens when they're in their 20s, from what I hear.
Yeah, we'll get there, I guess, huh?
Right.
What does success mean to you?
Success to me is about relationships with my family. And I think that's the heart of it, is good relationships. And you look at people who live a long time and are happy. All these studies show it's not about how much money you have. It's not even your physical health, but it's this community of people. And so I prioritize family. That's I think crucial, and to invest time in them. The other stuff can go away, your house, car, even health. But if people are around you, I think that's what matters.
Amen. Listen, Eric, I think we're there. Before we close out, do you have any last remarks or anything to say?
Well, I love your podcast. Thank you so much for having me. And I think everybody needs to live in another country at some point and encourage your family members to do that. That's where personal growth happens to a huge degree.
Wise words from a wise man. Again, Eric, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really, really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron. It's been a true pleasure.
Have a good evening.
All right. You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Again, Eric, thank you for coming on the podcast. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, listeners, for listening. This is Aaron Deliosa for An Immigrant's Life. I'll see you guys later.